Said, love thy brother than thyself, and everything will be made possible unto you, because he can surely turn the tides. He can push the tempest by.
To returning visitors to the Fredrick Resource Center, we're so appreciative that you made it back out. And for those who may be here for the first time, welcome to the Fredrick Resource Center, where we illuminate the life and legacy of Frederick Douglass and also other Africans and African Americans. Our heritage and culture is very near and dear to our heart as we try to approach it from a Black perspective, a Black nationalist perspective. Today we have a couple of special presentations for you. One is going to come from what we call our house poet. She hails from Harlem, New York, and has been working with the Fredrick Douglass Resource Center ever since she was exposed to it, offering her talents and time with her craft, which is spoken word. At this time, I'd like to call to the stage Sister Bright-Eyed Side.
Hey. Thank you. This first piece is a short piece. I found it in a Nikki Giovanni book, but always appropriate. It's called Revolutionary Dreams. I used to dream militant dreams of taking over America to show these white folks how it should be done. I used to dream radical dreams of blowing everyone away with my perceptive powers of correct analysis. I used to even think I'd be the one to stop the rioting and negotiate the peace. Then I awoke and that if I dream natural dreams of being a natural woman, doing what a woman does when she's natural, I would have a revolution. So that's just a video to me and my visit to Harriet Tubman's resting place this morning. I wanted to share the second piece called Underground Sounds that I actually wrote when we went out there for the convocation 2 years ago. And it always moved me when I went to the place, and I'm glad that you guys were able to experience that, especially with Dr. Johnson. Would you be able to hear it if a freedom train pulled up at a stop near you? Can you even fathom what a freedom train sounds like? Ponder on that as I break down this freedom train sound like. Because freedom trains have no doors, they have no cars, and they only stop when you realize your flesh is weak, but your spirit is in charge. This life can't hold you when you refuse to submit. Because if these are the only options, I'll choose death before I let my people live life like this. With ancestors like mine, there's no question that we can and will withstand the test of time. Currently, females obviously are having some misconceptions about femininity because the whole community is reflecting the lack of perseverance of that feminine energy. The emotion that won't allow you to stomach seeing your people degraded. The somber strength that disrupts your sleep until all of your children have made it. We bear and we keep on going. Let that wave in your spiritual waters. Daughters of the dust willing to fight back like buffalo soldiers. There's no turning back. There's only coming back. Because we stay this course until it's over. Images of a quiet, simple black Moses run through my mind. But the fire of her spirit is what I feel inside. Drums resounding inside of me, keeping the tune with my heartbeat. Can you hear it? Can't you feel it? Because it's coming. The pounding of angry feet running, that's a freedom song. Means the train is running. Believe me, everyone is not going. Me, I'm coming different, though. Your fight may be soft. Mine is a little rough. You may not be built for this struggle. The road is hard, the journey is long. Tell me, are you sure you haven't heard the freedom song? It's not for pretty girls that say we're too tough. Complaining this world is cold, this journey is rough. Cause when you hear the dogs coming, you gotta keep going. When you hear them after you gotta keep going. When the water's cold and keeps rushing, you keep going. When your feet are bloody and it's snowing, you still keep going. We don't know no cold. We don't know no fear. You don't know my heart. You haven't cried my tears. Tell me, have you ever heard a freedom song? You must have, if you have ever tried to right wrong. I have no choice but to battle oppression, because my African spirit won't allow me to survive these transgressions without using every bit of force and aggression. To remove these chains from my soul, I'm gonna keep on pressing. Tell me, have you ever heard a freedom song? The tune so sorrowful, the notes so long. The kind you hold like biting your tongue, because you know it's not the time. But it's changing seasons. The stars are about to be aligned. My people aren't ready, but the minute they are, I'm telling you, we taking off running, and we are running far. Like rushing waters, the strength is pure. Iron sharpens iron. We must endure. Because I would never even try to enslave a lion. Would never attempt to kill a soul so strong. Why even try it? A human life is something no amount of money can buy. You want to test these waters? Because I would suggest you try it. Because I will never stop going. But you may not be built for this. Spirit of a freedom fighter. It's way too real for this. The kind of mission you can't just dismiss. Maybe for you, ignorance is bliss. But I've never been out of full knowledge. No, it's not just as simple as going to college. When the system's set up against you, you gotta change it. You gotta fight. You gotta struggle. You gotta rearrange it. There is no sleep, because it's way too deep. So like rivers, we run to keep still, because we know this is real. So it's time to drown out the clamor of shackles and chains. Ask yourself if you heard a freedom song, if you ride a freedom train.
I think she's awesome. Don't you agree? Who visited the Tubman home today could appreciate a little deeper the words that she spoke. Also, we have visiting with us nationally certified school psychologist, an author, an orator, Prince of Pan-Africanism. Some people know him by. He's back here in Rochester, New York, the city of Douglas, to recite and perhaps critically analyze his blood relative's 5th of July oration. On July 5th, 1852, Fredrick Douglass, arguably one of the greatest orators of all time, delivered what was the century's most powerful speech, abolition speech, at a time of year when American freedom is celebrated across the nation, even by black folks. Douglas eloquently and diplomatically summoned the nation to resolve the contradiction between slavery and the founding principles of the United States. Dr. Umar Johnson, hailing from Philadelphia, if you please take the stage, and I will give this to you for the meaning of the 4th of July for the meeting.
Years ago to the day, my great-great-great-great-granduncle, Fredrick Augustus Washington Bailey Douglas, had this to say in the Corinthian Hall, which is now the site of the Rochester Plaza Hotel, where his descendant Umar Johnson just so happens to be spending tonight. Mr. President, friends, and fellow citizens, he who could address this audience without a quelling sensation has stronger nerves than I have. I do not remember ever to have appeared as a speaker before any assembly more shrinkingly, nor without greater distrust of my ability than I do this day. A feeling has crept over me quite unfavorable to the exercise of my limited powers of speech. The task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. I know that apologies of this sort are generally considered flat and unmeaning. I trust, however, that mine will not be so considered. Should I seem at ease, my appearance would much misrepresent me. The little experience I have had in addressing public meetings in country schoolhouses avails me nothing on the present occasion. The papers and placards say that I am to deliver a 4th of July oration. This certainly sounds large and out of the common way for me. It is true that I have often had the privilege to speak in this beautiful hall and to address many who now honor me with their presence. But neither their familiar faces nor the perfect gauge I think I have of Corinthian Hall seems to free me from my embarrassment. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is to me a matter of astonishment as well as gratitude. You will not, therefore, be surprised if, in what I have to say, I evidence no elaborate preparation, nor grace my speech with any high-sounding exordium. With little experience and with less learning, I have been able to throw my thoughts hastily and imperfectly together. And trusting to your patient and generous indulgence, I will proceed to lay them before you. This for the purpose of this celebration is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This to you, as what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God, it carries your minds back to the day, into the act of your great deliverance, into the signs and to the wonders associated with that act and that day. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. 76 years, though a good old age for a man, is but a mere speck in the life of a nation. 70 years and 10 is the allotted time for individual men. But nations number their years by thousands. According to this fact, you are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of your childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon. The eye of the reformer is met with angry flashes, portending disastrous times, but his heart may well be light at the thought that America is young, and that she is still in the impressionable stage of her existence. May he not hope that high lessons of wisdom, of justice, and of truth will yet give direction to her destiny. Were the nation older, the patriot's heart might be sadder, and the reformer's brow heavier. Its future might be shrouded in gloom, and the hope of its prophets go out in sorrow. There is consolation in the thought that America is young. Great streams are not easily turned from channels, worn deep in the course of ages. They may sometimes rise in quiet and stately majesty and inundate the land, refreshing and fertilizing the earth with their mysterious properties. They may also rise in wrath and fury, and bear away on their angry waves the accumulated wealth of years of toil and hardship. They, however, gradually flow back to the same old channel and flow on as serenely as ever. But while the river may not be turned aside, it may dry up and leave nothing behind but the withered branch and the unsightly rock, to howl in the abyss-sweeping wind the sad tale of departed glory. As with rivers, you should know, so with nations. Fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on the associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your quote-unquote sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not born yet then. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the British government as the home government, in England as the fatherland. This home government, you know, although a considerable distance from your home, did in the exercise of parental prerogatives impose upon its colonial children such restraints, burdens, and limitations as in the mature judgment it deemed wise, right, and proper. But your fathers, who had not adopted the fashionable idea of this day, of the infallibility of government and the absolute character of its acts, presumed to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and the justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far in their excitement as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, oppressive, and altogether as such ought not to be quietly submitted to. I scarcely need say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers. Such a declaration of agreement on my part would not be worth much to anybody. It would certainly prove nothing as to what part I might have taken had I lived during the great controversy of 1776. To say now that America was right and England was wrong is exceedingly easy. Everybody can say that. The dastard, not less than the noble brave, can flippantly descant on the tyranny of England towards the American colonies. It is fashionable to do so now. But there was a time when to pronounce against England and in favor of the cause of the colonies tried men's souls. They who did so were accounted in their day plotters of mischief, agitators, and rebels. Dangerous men, they were called. To side with the right against the wrong, with the weak against the strong, and with the oppressed against the oppressor. Here lies the America, and the one which of all others seems unfashionable in our day. The cause of liberty may be stabbed by the men who glory in the deeds of your father, but to proceed, feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government, your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought to redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and a loyal manner. Their conduct was wholly exceptional. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn. Yet they persevered. They were not meant to look back. As the sheet anchor takes a firmer hold, when the ship is tossed by the storm, so did the cause of your fathers go stronger as it breasted the chilling blast of kingly displeasure. The greatest and best of British statesmen admitted its justice, and the loftiest eloquence of the British Senate came to its support. But with that blindness, which seems to be the unvarying characteristic of tyrants since Pharaoh and his hosts were drowned in the Red Sea, the British government persisted in the exactions complained about. The madness of this course, we believe, is admitted now, even by England, but we fear the lesson is wholly lost on our present fathers. Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became restive under the treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in the colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. I said with brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of a total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distance of time, regarded. The timid and the prudent, as has been intimated of that day, were of course shocked and alarmed by it. Such people lived then, have lived before, and will probably ever have a place on this planet. And their course in respect to any great change, no matter how great the good to be attained or the wrong to be redressed by it, may be calculated with as much precision as can be the course of the stars. They hate all changes, but silver, gold, and copper change. Of this sort of change, they are always strongly in favor. These people were called Tories in the day of your fathers, and the appellation probably conveyed the same idea that is meant by a more modern, though a somewhat less euphonious term, which we often find in our papers applied to some of our old politicians. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful, but amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country moved on with it. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority and national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution. And as we seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day, whose transparency is at all equal to this, It may refresh your minds and help my story if I take just a minute to read it. Quote, resolve that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are, quote, absolved from the allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be dissolved. Citizens, your fathers made that great resolution. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruit of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you therefore may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history. The very rainbow in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny. Pride and patriotism, not less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the rainbow to the chain of your nation's destiny. So indeed, I also regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost. From the round top of your ship of state, dark and threatening clouds may be seen. Heavy billows, like mountains in the distance, disclose to the leagued forms of flinty rocks. That boat drawn, that chain broken, and all is lost. Cling to this day. Cling to it and to its principles with the grasp of a storm-tossed mariner to a spar at midnight. The coming into being of a nation, in any circumstances, is an interesting event. But besides general considerations, there were peculiar circumstances which made the event of this republic an event of special attractiveness. The whole scene, as I look back to it, was simple, dignified, and sublime. The population of this country at that time stood at the insignificant number of 3 million. The country was poor in the munitions of war. The population was weak and scattered. And the country, a wilderness unsubdued. There were not then no means of concert and combination such as exists now. There were then neither stinging nor lightning had then been reduced to order and discipline. From the Potomac to the Delaware was a journey of many days. Under these and innumerable other disadvantages, your fathers declared for liberty, independence, and triumph. Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men. Too great enough to give frame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to raise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable. And yet, I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did, and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. They loved their country better than their own private interests, and though this is not the highest form of human excellence, all will concede that it is a rare virtue, and that when it is exhibited, it ought to command your respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interests. They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but that they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times. How circumspect, exact and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour, their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. They seized upon eternal principles and set a glorious example in their defense. Mark them, fully appreciating the hardships to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, honorably inviting the scrutiny of an onlooking world, reverently appealing to the heaven to attest their sincerity. Soundly comprehending the solemn responsibility they were about to assume, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them, your fathers, the fathers of this republic, did most deliberately, under the inspiration of a glorious patriotism, and with a sublime faith in the great principles of justice and freedom, lay deep the cornerstone of this national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur all around you. Of this fundamental work this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstrations of joyous enthusiasm, banners and pennants wave exultingly on the breeze. The din of business, too, is rushed. Even Mammon seems to have quieted his grasp on this day. The ear-piercing fife and the stirring drum unite their accents with the ascending peal of 1,000 church bells. Prayers are made, hymns are sung, sermons are preached in honor of this day. While the quick, merry tramp of a great and multitudinous nation, echoed back by all the hills, valleys, and mountains of a vast continent, bespeak the occasion, one of thrilling and universal interest, nation's jubilee. Friends and citizens, I need not enter into further causes which led to this anniversary. Many of you understand them better than I do. You could instruct me in them, perhaps. That is a branch of knowledge in which you feel a much deeper interest than your speaker. The causes which led to the separation of the colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They have all been taught in your common schools, narrated at your fireside, unfolded from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls, and are as familiar to you as household words. They form the staple of your national poetry and eloquence. I remember also that as a people, Americans are remarkably familiar with all facts which make in their own favor. This is esteemed by some as a national trait, perhaps a national weakness. It is a fact that whatever makes for the wealth or for the reputation of Americans and can be had cheap will be found by Americans. I shall not be charged with slandering Americans if I say I think the American side of any question may be safely left in American hands. I leave, therefore, the great deeds of your fathers to other gentlemen whose claim to have been regularly descended will be less likely to be disputed than mine. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time of God and his cause is the ever-living now. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead bury its dead. Act in the living present. Heart within and God overhead. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. To all inspiring motives, to noble deeds which can be gained from the past, we are welcome. But now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work you have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers, unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence. Sidney Smith tells us that men seldom eulogize the wisdom and virtues of their fathers, but to excuse some folly or wickedness in themselves. This truth is not a doubtful. There are illustrations of it, near and remote, ancient and modern. It was fashionable hundreds of years ago for the children of Jacob to boast, "We have Abraham as our father," when they had long lost Abraham's faith and Abraham's spirit. That people contented themselves under the shadow of Abraham's great name, while they repudiated the deeds which made his name great. Need I remind you that a similar thing is being done all over this country today? Need I tell you that the Jews are not the only people who built the tombs of the prophets and garnished the sepulchres of the righteous? Washington could not die till he had broken the chains of his slaves. Yet his monument is built up by the price of human blood, and the traitors in the bodies of souls of men shout, "We have Washington as our father." Alas, it should be so, yet it is. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often interred with their bones. Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to speak, to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I here, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Would to God, both for your sake and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful? For who is there so cold that a nation's sympathy could not warm him? Who so obdurate and dead to the claims of gratitude that would not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? Who so stolid and selfish that would not give his voice to the swell, the hallelujahs of a nation's jubilee when the chains of servitude have been torn from his limbs? I am not that man. In a case like that, the dumb might eloquently speak, and the lame man leap as a heart. But such is not the state of my case. I say it with the sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not inclined within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought light and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. The 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, but I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems, where inhumane mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak here today? If so, there is a parallel to your conduct. And let me warn you that it is dangerous to copy the example of a nation whose crimes, towering up to heaven, were thrown down by the breath of the Almighty, burying that nation in irrevocable ruin. I can today take up the plaintive linen of appeal and woe-smitten people by we sat down. Yeah, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there, they that carried us away captive required of us a song. And they who wasted us required of us mirth. Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason. More scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject, then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view. Standing there, identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of this nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery. The great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice, or who is not at heart a slaveholder, shall not confess to be right and just. But I fancy I hear someone of my audience say, it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists fail to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light? Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? That point is conceded already. Nobody doubts it. The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactments of laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia, which, if committed by a black man, no matter how ignorant he may be, subject him to the punishment of death. 72 crimes. While only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a mortal, intellectual, and responsible being? The manhood of the slave is conceded. It is admitted in the fact that Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read and write. When you can point to any such laws and reference to the beasts of the field, then I will consent and argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls in your air, when the cattle of your hills, when the fish in your sea, and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man. For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. Is it not astonishing that while we are plowing and planting and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals and brass and iron, copper, silver, gold, and that while we are reading and writing and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchant secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are still called upon to prove that we are men. Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty, that he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is that a question for Republicans? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving the doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans dividing and subdividing a discourse to show that men have a natural right to freedom? Speaking of it relatively and positively, negatively and affirmatively, to do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know slavery is wrong for him. What am I to argue? That it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with iron, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to murder their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employment for my time and strength than such arguments will imply. What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine, that God did not establish it, that our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in the thought. That which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? They that can, they, I cannot. The time for such argument is past. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. Not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty and unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass-fronted liberty, and equality are but hollow mockery. Your prayers and your hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchies and dispositions of the old world, travel through South America, search out area abuse, and when you have found the last, lay the facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival. Take the American slave trade, which we are told by the papers is especially prosperous just now. Exeter Benton tells us that the price of men was never higher than now. He mentions the fact that to show slavery is in no danger. This trade is one of the peculiarities of American institutions. It is carried on in all the large towns and cities in one half of this Confederacy. Millions are pocketed every year by dealers in this horrid traffic. In several states, this trade is the chief source of wealth. It is called, in contradiction to the foreign slave trade, the internal slave trade. It is probably called so, too, in order to divert it from the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated. That trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy. It has been denounced with burning words from the high places of the nation as an execrable traffic. To arrest it, to put an end to it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhumane traffic, opposed alike to the jaws of God and a man. The duty to extirpate and to destroy it is admitted even by our doctors of divinity. In order to put an end to it, some of these last have consented to their colored brethren, nominally free, should leave this country and establish themselves on the western coast of Africa. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much execration is poured out by Americans upon all those engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation. And their business is in fact deemed honorable. Behold the practical operation of this internal slave trade. The American slave trade, sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what is a swine drover. I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all of our southern states. They perambulate amongst the country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers armed with pistol, whip, and bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market of New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly or in lots to suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field, and the deadly sugar mill mark the sad procession as it moves wearily along, and that inhuman wretch that drives them. Here the savage yells and the blood-curdling wolves as he hurries on is a fright of captives. There, see the old man with locks thin and gray. Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun, her brimming tears falling on the brow of the babe in her arms. See to that girl of 13, weeping, yes, weeping, as she thinks of her mother from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly you hear a quick snap, like the discharge of a rifle. The feathers clank, and the chains rattle simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with the scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the baby. speed had faltered under the weight of her child and her chains. The gash on her shoulder tells her to move on. Followers drove to New Orleans, attend the auction, see men examined like horses, see the forms of women brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever, and never forget the deep sad sobs that arose from the sacred multitude. From the scattered multitude, tell me, citizens, where under the sun you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking, yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the ruling parts of the United States. I, Fredrick Douglass, was born amid such sights and scenes. To me, the American slave trade is a terrible reality. When I was a child, my soul was often pierced with the sense of its horrors. I lived on Philpott Street, Fells Point, Baltimore, and have watched from the wharves the slave ships in the basin, anchored from the shore with their cargoes of human flesh, waiting for favorable winds to whack them down the Chesapeake. There was at that time a grand slave mart kept at the head of Pratt Street by Austin Woodfolk. His agents were sent into every town and country in Maryland, announcing their arrival through the papers and on flaming handbills, headed cash for Negroes. These men were generally well dressed and very captivating in their manners, ever ready to drink, to treat, to gamble. The fate of many a slave had depended upon the turn of a single card. And many a child had been snatched from the arms of its mother by bargains arranged in a state of brutal drunkenness. The fleshmongers gather up their victims by dozens and drive them chained to the General Depot at Baltimore. When a sufficient number have been collected here, a ship is chartered for the purpose of conveying the forlorn crew to Mobile or New Orleans. From the slave prison to the ship, they are usually driven in the darkness of night, for since the anti-slavery agitation, a certain caution is observed. In the deep, still darkness of midnight, I have often been aroused by the dead, heavy footsteps and the piteous cries of the chain gangs that passed our door. The anguish of my boyish heart was intense, and I was often consoled when speaking to my mistress in the morning to hear her say that the custom was very wicked, that she hated to hear the rattle of the chains and the heart-rending cries. I was glad to find one who sympathized with me in my horror. Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in this boasted republic. In this solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways in the south. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on its way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sold like sheep, sold like swine, and knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken. To gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and sellers of men, my soul sickens at the sight. Is this the land your fathers loved? The freedom which they toiled to win? Is this the earth whereon they moved? Are these the graves that they slumber in? But a still more inhuman, disgraceful, and scandalous state of things remains to be presented. By an act of American Congress not yet 2-year-old, slavery has been nationalized. In its most horrible and revolting form, by that act, Mason and Dixon's line has been obliterated. New York has become Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but it is now an institution of the whole United States. The power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner, and American Christianity, where these go, may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He is a bird for the sportsman's gun. By that most foul and fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. domain is hunting ground for men, not for thieves and robbers, enemies of society merely, but for men guilty of no crime. Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your secretary of state, your lords, nobles, and ecclesiastics enforce as a duty to you. You owe to your free and glorious country and to your God that you do this accursed thing. No fewer than 40 Americans have, within the past 2 years, been hunted down and without a moment's warning, hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these have had wives and children dependent on them for bread. But of this, no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the right of marriage and to the rights, all the rights of this republic, the rights of God included. For black men, there is neither law nor justice, humanity nor religion. The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery and 5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any 2 villains is sufficient under this hell black enactment to send the most pious and exemplary black man into the remorseless jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witnesses for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor. Let this daily fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that in tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic, Christian America, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe and are bound in deciding the case of man's liberty to hear only his accuser. In glaring violation of justice, in shameless disregard of the forms of administering law, in cunning arrangement to entrap the defenseless, and in diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical legislation. I doubt that there be another nation on the globe having the brass and basis to put such a law on the statute book. If any man in this assembly thinks different from me in this matter and feels able to disprove my statements, I willingly confront him at any suitable time and place that he may select. I take this law to be one of the grossest infringements of Christian liberty. And if the churches and ministers of our country were not so stupidly blind or most wickedly indifferent, they too would so regard it. At the very moment that they are thanking God for the enjoyment of civil and religious liberty and for the right to worship God according to the dictates of their own consciences, they are utterly silent in respect to a law which robs religion of its chief significance and makes it utterly worthless to a world lying in wickedness. Did this law concern the men, Amis, and Koming? Abridge the right to sing psalms, to partake of the sacrament, or to engage in any of the ceremonies of religion? It would be smitten by the thunder of 1,000 pulpits. A general shout would go up from the church demanding repeal, instant repeal, and it would go hard with that politician who presumed to solicit the votes of the people without inscribing this motto on his banner. Further, if this demand were not complied with, another Scotland would be added to the history of religious liberty, and the stern old covenanters would be thrown into the shade. John Knox would be seen at every church door and heard from every pulpit, and Fillmore would have no more quarter that was shown by Knox to the beautiful but treacherous Queen Mary of Scotland. The fact that the church of our country, with fractional exceptions, does not esteem the fugitive slave law as a declaration of war against religious liberty implies that the church regards religion simply as a form of worship and empty ceremony and not a vital principle requiring active benevolence, justice, love, and goodwill towards men. It esteems sacrifice above mercy, psalm singing above right doing, solemn meetings above practical right righteousness, a worship that can be conducted by persons who refuse to give shelter to the houseless, to give bread to the hungry, clothing to the naked, and who enjoin obedience to a law forbidding these acts of mercy is a curse, not a blessing to men. The Bible addresses all such persons as scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites who pay tithe of mint, anise, and cumin and have omitted the weightier matters of law, judgment, mercy, and faith. But the church of this country is not only indifferent to the wrongs of the slave, it actually takes sides with the oppressors. It has made itself the bulwark of American slavery and the shield of American slave hunters. Many of its most eloquent divines, who stand at the very lights of the church, has shamelessly given the sanction of religion and the Bible to the whole slave system. They have taught that man may properly be a slave, and that the relation of master and slave is ordained by God. That to send back and escape bondage to his master is clearly the duty of the followers of Jesus Christ. Yes. And this horrible blasphemy is palmed off upon the world for Christianity. For my part, I would say, welcome infidelity. Welcome atheism. Welcome anything in preference to the gospel as preached by those divines. They convert the very name of religion into an engine of tyranny and barbarous cruelty, and serve to confine more infidels in this age than all the infidel writings of Thomas Paine, Voltaire, and Bolingbroke put together have done. These ministers make religion a cold and flinty-hearted thing, having neither principles of right action nor bowels of compassion. They strip the love of God of its beauty and leave the throne of religion a huge, horrible, repulsive form. It is a religion of oppressors, tyrants, man-stealers, and thugs. It is not that pure and undefiled religion which is from above and which is first pure, then peaceable, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. But a religion which favors the rich against the poor, which exalts the proud above the humble, which divides mankind into two classes, tyrants and slaves, which says to the man in chains, stay there, and to the oppressor, oppress on. It is a religion which may be professed and enjoyed by all the robbers and enslavers of mankind. It makes God a respecter of persons, denies the fatherhood of the race, and tramples in dust the great truth of the brotherhood of man. All this we affirm to be true of the popular church and the popular worship of our land and nation, a religion, a church, and a worship which, on the authority of inspired wisdom, we pronounce to be an abomination before God. In the language of Isaiah, the American church might well be addressed, bring no more vain oblations. Incense is an abomination unto me. The new moons and Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies, I cannot obey with. It is iniquity. Even the solemn meeting, your new moon and your appointed feast, my soul hated. They are a trouble to me. I am weary to bear them. And when you spread forth your hands, I will hide mine eyes away from you. Yeah, when you make many prayers, I will not hear them. Your hands are full of blood. Cease to do evil. Learn to do well. Seek judgment. Relieve the oppressed. Judge for the fatherless. Plead for the widow. The American church is guilty when viewed in connection with what it is doing to uphold slavery, but it is superlatively guilty when viewed in its connection with its ability to abolish slavery. The sin of which it is guilty is one of omission as well as commission. Outward bonds but uttered with the common sense of every man and all observant of the actual state of the case will receive his truth when he declared that, quote, there is no power out of the church that could sustain slavery and power if it were not sustained in the church. let the religious press, the pulpit, the Sunday school, the conference meeting, the great ecclesiastical missionary Bible and tract associates of the land array their immense powers against slavery and slaveholding, and the whole system of crime and blood would be scattered to the winds, and that they do not do this involves them in the most awful responsibility of which the mind can conceive. In prosecuting the anti-slavery enterprise, we have been asked to spare the church, to spare the ministry. But how we ask that such a thing be done? We are met on the threshold of our efforts for the redemption of the slave by the church and ministry of the country, and battle arrayed against us, and we are compelled to fight or to flee. From what quarter, I beg to know, has proceeded a fire so deadly upon our ranks during the last 2 years, as from the northern pulpit? As the champions of oppression, the chosen men of American theology have appeared men honored for their so-called piety and their real learning. The lords of Buffalo, the Springs of New York, the Lathrops of Auburn, the Coxes and Spencers of Brooklyn, the Gaddis and Sharps of Boston, the Deweys of Washington, and other great religious rights of the land have, in utter denial of the authority of him by whom they profess to be called into the ministry, deliberately taught us, against the example of the Hebrews and against the remonstrance of the apostles, that we ought to obey man's law before we obey the law of God. My spirit wearies of such blasphemy, and how such men can be supported as the standing types of representatives of Jesus Christ. It is a mystery which I leave others to penetrate. In speaking of the American church, however, let it be distinctly understood that I mean the great mass of the religious organizations of our land. There are exceptions, and I thank God that there are exceptions. Noble men may be found scattered all over these northern states, of whom Henry Ward Beecher of Brooklyn, Samuel J. May of Syracuse, and my esteemed friend, Reverend R.R. Raymond on the platform are shining examples. And let me say further that upon these men lies the duty to inspire our ranks with high religious faith and zeal, and to cheer us on in the great mission of the slave's redemption from his chains. One is struck with the difference between the attitude of the American church toward the anti-slavery movement and that occupied by the church in England towards a similar movement in that country. There, in England, the church, true to its mission of ameliorating, of elevating, and improving the condition of mankind, came forward promptly, bound by the wounds of the West Indian slave, and restored him to his liberty. There, the question of emancipation was a high religious question. It was demanded in the name of humanity. And according to the law of the living God, the Sharps, the Clarkstons, the Wilberforces, the Buxtons, the Butchels, and the Nibs were alike famous for their piety and for their philanthropy. The anti-slavery movement there was not an anti-church movement, for the reason that the church took its full share and prosecuted that movement. And the anti-slavery movement in this country will seek to be an anti-church movement, where the church of this country shall assume a favorable instead of a hostile position towards that movement. Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation, as embodied in the two great political parties, is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 million of your countrymen. You hurl your anathemas at the crown-headed tyrants of Russia and Austria, and you pride yourselves on your democratic institutions, while you, yourselves, consent to be the mere tool and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and Carolina. You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad. You honor them with banquets. You greet them with ovations, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from oppression in your own land, you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill. You glory equality and your universal education, yet you maintain a system as barbarous and dreadful as ever stained the character of a nation. A system begun in avarice, supported in pride, and perpetuated in cruelty. You shed tears over fallen Hungary and make the sad story of her wrongs the theme of your poets, statements, and orators, till your gallant sons are ready to fly to arms to vindicate her cause against the oppressor. But in regard to the 10,000 wrongs of the American slave, you would enforce the strictest silence and would hail him as an enemy of the nation who dares to make those wrongs the subject of public discourse. You are all on fire at the mention of liberty for France or for Ireland, but are as cold as an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America. You discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system which in its very essence casts a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery to throw off a 3-penny tax on tea, and yet wring the last hard-earned offspring from the grasp of the black laborers of your own country. You profess to believe that of one blood God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another. Yet you notoriously hate and glory in your hatred all men whose skins are not colored as your own. You declare before the world and are understood by the world to declare that you hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and yet you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, quote, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose, a seventh part of the inhabitants of your country. Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country blands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword to a mocking earth. It is the antagonistic force in your government. The only thing that seriously disturbs and endangers your union. It fetters your progress. It is the enemy of improvement, the deadly foe of education. It fosters pride. It breeds insolence. It promotes vice. It shelters crime. It is a curse to the earth that supports it, and yet you cling to it as if it were the sheet anchor of all your hopes. Oh, be warned. Be warned. A horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fling from you the hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 million crush and destroy it forever. But it is answered in reply to all this that precisely what I have now denounced is in fact guaranteed and sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States. That the right to hold and to hunt slaves is a part of that Constitution framed by the illustrious fathers of this republic. Then I dare to affirm, notwithstanding all I have said before, your fathers stoop, basically stoop, to palter with us in a double sense and keep the word of promise to the ear, but break it to the heart. And instead of being the honest men I had before declared them to be, they were the various impostors that ever practiced on mankind. This is the inevitable conclusion, and from it there's no escape. But I differ from those who charge this baseness of the framers of the Constitution of the United States. It is a slander upon their memory, at least so I believe. There is not time now to argue the constitutional question at length, nor have I had the ability to discuss it as it ought to be discussed. The subject has been handled with masterly power by Samuel Spooner, Esquire, by William Goddell, by Samuel Sewell, Esquire, and last, though not least, by Gerald Smith, Esquire. These gentlemen have, as I think, fully and clearly vindicated the Constitution from any design to support slavery at this hour. Fellow citizens, there is no matter in respect to which the people of the North have allowed themselves to be so ruinously imposed upon as that of the pro-slavery character of the Constitution. In that instrument I hold there is neither warrant, license, nor sanction of the hateful thing, but interpreted as it ought to be interpreted, the Constitution is a glorious liberty document. Read its preamble, consider its purposes. Is slavery among them? Is it at the gateway, or is it in the temple? It is neither. While I do intend to argue this question on the present occasion, let me ask if it be not somewhat singular that if the Constitution were intended to be, by its framers and adopters, a slave-holding instrument, why neither slavery, slave-holding, nor slave can be found anywhere within it? What would be thought of an instrument drawn up, legally drawn up, for the purpose of entitling the city of Rochester to a tract of land in which no mention of land was made? Now, there are certain rules of interpretation for the proper understanding of all legal instruments. These rules are well established. They are plain common sense rules, such as you and I and all of us can understand and apply without having passed years in the study of law. I scout the idea that the question of the constitutionality or unconstitutionality of slavery is not a question for the people. I hope that every American citizen has a right to form an opinion of the Constitution and to propagate that opinion and to use all honorable means to make his opinion the prevailing one. Without this right, the liberty of an American citizen would be as insecure as that of a Frenchman. Ex-Vice President Dallas tells us that the Constitution is an object to which no American mind can be too attentive and no American heart too devoted. He further says, the Constitution in its words is plain and intelligible and is meant for the homebred, unsophisticated understanding of our fellow citizens. Senator Berrien tells us that the Constitution is the fundamental law, that which controls all others, the character of our liberties, which every citizen has a personal interest in understanding thoroughly. The testimony of Senator Reese, Lewis Cass, and many others that might be named, who are everywhere esteemed as sound lawyers, so regard the Constitution. I take it, therefore, that it is not presumption in a private citizen to form an opinion of that instrument. Now take the Constitution according to its plain reading, and I defy the presentation of a single pro-slavery clause in it. On the other hand, it will be found to contain principles and purposes entirely hostile to the existence of slavery. Ladies and gentlemen, I have detained my audience entirely too long already. At some future period, I will gladly avail myself of an opportunity to give this subject a full and fair discussion. Allow me, Fredrick Douglass, to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work for the downfall of slavery. The arm of the Lord is not shortened, and the doom of slavery is certain. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope, while drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions. My spirit is also cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot around in the same old path of its fathers without interference. The time was when such could be done. Long-established customs of hurtful character that formerly fenced themselves in and do their evil work with social impunity knowledge was then confined and enjoyed by the privileged few, and the multitude walked on in mental darkness. But a change has now come. Over the affairs of mankind, walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. It makes its pathway over and under the sea, as well as on the earth. Wind, steam, and lightning are its charitable agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. The far-off and almost fabulous Pacific rose in grandeur at our feet. The celestial empire, the mystery of ages is being solved. The fiat of the Almighty, let there be light, has not yet spent its force. No abuse, no outrage, whether in taste, sport, or avarice, can now hide itself from the all-pervading light. The iron shoe, the crippled foot of China, must be seen in contrast with nation. Africa, Africa, Africa must rise and put on her yet unwoven garment. Ethiopia shall stretch out her hands unto God. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join me in saying, Godspeed the year of Jubilee, the wide world over, when from the galling chains set free, the oppressed shall violently bend the knee, and wear the yoke of tyranny, like Bruce no more, that year will come, and freedom's reign to man his plundered rights again restored. Godspeed the day when human blood shall cease to flow, and every crime be understood, the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil, good, not blow for blow. That day will come, and all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend, each foe. I thank you all gathered here at Corinthian Hall this July 5th, 1852. And I thank you for the privilege of coming to address the citizens of my city of Rochester, New York. I wish to say no more, and I bid you all good evening. Fredrick. Wow! First time I ever read that in public, and ever in my life. First time somebody ever heard it. Questions and answers? Anything at all? Any comments on the speech? Anything caught you by surprise? I know many people were shocked by the Pan-Africanist shout at the end about Africa must rise. And Ethiopia shall stretch out our hands into glory, which is a famous quote that was uttered by who? Marcus Messiah Garvey, Henry Highland Garnett, Alexander Crummell. Remember, Frederick Douglass was influenced significantly, I believe, by all of the grandfathers of Pan-Africanism who were his running mates and at times adversaries. Remember, he co-edited the North Star newspaper with the grandfather of Pan-Africanism, Martin Delany, and then they split over ideological differences, repatriation versus integration. Him and Henry Highland Garnett had a serious debate at one of the American Negro Academy Conventions for Black Men, American Negro Convention for Black Men, on whether or not we should arm the slaves or whether we should peacefully protest for the 13th Amendment. Alexander Crummell was a friend of his. Edward Wilmot Blythe, who came to America from the Caribbean to go to the seminary school, but he was rejected because of his race, ended up in Liberia, went on to become Secretary of State. These were the people who surrendered. So when you read Frederick Douglass, like Booker T. Washington and many other people of the day, it is quite hard to draw the conclusion that they were integrationists because they were actually more complex than that. 4th of July speech, that's nationalism. The speech he gave on the occasion of West Indian emancipation, that was nationalism. So integrationists of that day, and I would hate to say they were integrationist nationalists because that would confuse the hell out of them. lack of a better word, that's what we need to work on. Fighting for inclusion while at the same time defending the rights of independent institutions. Questions or comments? My brother.
One thing that was in that speech that stuck to me was how he displayed the contradictions of the of the Americans that fought for their independence. And basically he displayed in that speech that slavery was their nightmare because that's what they were facing under British rule, under the British monarchy. So, you know, it's funny to me that they seen how inhumane slavery was back during the quote-unquote American Revolution in 1776. But kept it going. Even after they seen how inhumane it was, how subhuman it was, because obviously they didn't want to become slaves. As a matter of fact, one of their arguments towards British was, my blood is British blood. I am flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood, brethren of my brethren. But they were talking about British. So anyone who's supposed to be slaves are supposed to be someone who looks black, so to speak. But they still see the inhumanity of it. You know, that's funny. And another thing about that speech that really sticks to me too, the courage and the bravery that he had displayed by speaking these fiery words.
So an all-white audience.
To an all-white audience.
They thought he was coming to talk about how great America was.
Exactly. That's powerful.
In fact, his house was burned down, I believe, after that too. Yeah, not right after, but after. It's probably why they moved his statue over to the park. Quote from Abraham Lincoln, the great, not liberator, imitator. You see, he said, if you want to test a man's character, don't give him adversity. Any man can stand up under trial and tribulation. He said, if you really want to test a man's character, give him power. And then you really see the type of person he is. It's coming from one of the chief devils himself. And we see this in our community all the time, no? Brothers and sisters who go from scrapping for bread and butter, they real noble when they poor. They build themselves up, and then look at that power corrupts. And what did Abraham Lincoln say? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think Europeans are that living contradiction.
Brother Johnson, I want to thank you so much for coming to Rochester and reading that speech again. I maintain that if Douglas was around doing the same thing today, somebody would kill him because of the word that he used, the truth that he spoke. I hope that you'll be coming back and forth to this center because we need it. The black community needs it. It is missed. It is necessary for our quote, freedom. But our worst enemy is not the man. Our worst enemy is ourselves. And if we could hear more of that kind of discussion and have discussion on what Douglas said, everything in it, you know, our churches, our leaders, everybody in our community, we just don't know who we are and what we are. We need to teach that we are somebody. Or other folk were somebody, but we forgot that. I just hope that you'll be coming back again and again to talk, present, and share. Because in this day and age, when our kids graduate from the school system in this city, I'm not sure what the figures are, 9% or 43%. But it's not the system's fault. It's our fault. I would hope that more, when you come the next time, we'll have more people here to share and even plan for a future. But I just want to thank you so much for coming. I don't know the thing I need to say, but I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing that speech that we all need to read once a month. so that we can all come together and do what is necessary for us first, and then the city, the state, the country secondarily, because we are still not citizens enjoying the fullness of what the Constitution is supposed to give us. But once again, I just want to thank you so much for coming and reading that speech that I hope has touched at least 4 or 5 people in this room to go out there and do something themselves, not let others do it, because they know I'm going to do it if we don't do it. One thing that's going to happen is this election that's coming up. There's going to be division because we have a black person running again, and who we're going to vote for. But again, thank you so much for coming in. I hope this is not going to be your last time in the Senate.
No, sir. Reverend Hunt, brothers and sisters who founded the Fredrick Resource Center.
How you doing, brother? It's good to hear you. I didn't catch you last year when you came. I think something that stood out for me with the speech was that there was a lot of political goings on in that period, just like there is right now. But amid all the political going on, the racial piece is what both then and I think now had a lot to do with keeping these people subjugated. You know what I mean? A lot like today, the way the people are oppressed, the way so many black people are oppressed and have been oppressed. And the fact that so many Caucasians have a hard time taking another look or hearing what's being said by oppressed people. The fact that in spite of, and I think it affects us too, among ourselves, we get caught up in our religious designations or our political designations, and we don't recognize the strength that we have as a race of people. So I thought that was kind of interesting. All that was being said, all the contradictions that in that piece was that racial piece. But thanks again for coming, man.
Thank you. It's an honor. It's an honor.
Just want to add to the gratitude for this community to come hear you speak. It was very obvious that your ancestors were pushing you forward. You personified that vigor, that energy, and that pride that Frederick Douglass displayed during those very contentious times. What resonated with me in that speech was how he so boldly held accountable the people in the room for how they hurt a whole group of people. What is evident to me is that we lack a voice like that currently. It's very disappointing as a black woman to not be able to identify a black voice from a man similar to that voice that was said so many years ago. We need that desperately. We need those men to step up in our community and lead us. That's all I have to say.
That was a powerful point she made. You're so true. I never even thought about that. It did cross my mind. Douglass was, quote unquote, the black leader of the day. Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson would be equivalents today. Not that they're Douglass's equivalent, but the common acceptance of them as black national leaders. You can clearly see the courage of Douglass versus the courage of a Sharpton. He wouldn't dare accept an invitation from white folks on the 4th of July and give a speech of that character to white people. Nor would Jesse, nor would Cornell, nor would Tavis, and I don't even need to mention Obama. So I totally agree with you. I didn't even consider that, but you're right on the money with that. We lack a national leader who would express that type of sentiment to white people's faces. He did not disrespect them. He simply told the truth of the day. We do lack that.
I just have a question or a comment, really. Is it valid to say that if the voice of the day is the sentiment of the people, and despite our unwillingness to accept that, on some level, I feel like the youth in their outcry and in their blatant refusal to accept a lot of the things that the older generations do kind of let slide or let go by, or feel like they have to placate the larger white audience, that the unrest that we see and the rate of death of these young kids is the voice of those black men right now. Because on some level, those are the only people that are willing to address what is being said, what is being done to them, and despite like the lack of polish on it, that's still a valid voice. And I feel like because it's not coming in the package that people want it to be in, that people are trying to ignore that voice instead of actually listen to it and hear what it is saying. And there's so many young black men that say, no, I'm not going to church, no, F that, no, I'm not going to school, no, I'm not listening to my parents. But because they're not being seen as the black leader, they're leading us where we're going. And even if they're going to jail, it's still where we're going. And I feel like people kind of are saying that there's no black voice in that same package. And yes, it's not Douglas, but there is some refusal and pushback to white supremacy where it's affecting them. Is that, I don't know how to feel about that.
I think I follow you. I would just say that amongst the voices of our youth, there is a reactionary element that I think is quite dangerous to our process and our progress. One of my biggest concerns about the young voices, brothers and sisters in my line of work who do what I do, the so-called scholars in the conscious community, is I think that the hope has been transformed into hate. And I'm seeing our young people be induced into this belief that you actually have to hate white people in order to overcome white supremacy. I'm not going to teach my two daughters to hate anybody, but yet still they'll be able to understand their enemy and overcome it. I think that some of us are starting to buy into the belief that we have to become just as ruthless as white people in order to overcome white supremacy. I do not believe that. And so there's a split, because there's brothers and sisters like me who say, we do not have to beat them in order to deal with them. And you got other brothers and sisters saying, no, you got to come and become just like the devil in order to beat the devil. And so we're seeing a splitting of ideology, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the conscious community today lacks strong elderhood. The scholars who are in the conscious community, the elders, many of them are either intimidated or indifferent to the youth. And as a result of that, they do not correct them when they should. So you now, for the first time ever, have a Wild Wild West mentality amongst those who are supposed to be providing sufficient information and leadership. And I think that in many cases, it's going to end up hurting more than it's going to help. They're giving out good information most of the time. But then what they're telling people to do with that information, I don't know if it's necessarily in the best interest of our people. I see a lot of con gaming going on. I see a lot of troublemaking going on. I see a lot of anti-African behavior taking place within the so-called conscious community, which is why I don't even like to consider myself a part of it. But having said that, I do agree with you. I think the youth do espouse a certain type of energy that we need, but I also think they need more direction from us. Even if you look at the Fredrick Douglass, they were elders in the anti-slavery movement who he looked up to, who gave him, opinions and thoughts and advice. Our youth in the conscious community lacked that. I think if we had more strong-willed see less of the coonery that you see in the conscious community. But the Dr. Biz and the Dr. Clark and the Amos Wilson, the hands-on type of brothers, they're not really out there like that no more. You know, so we just got to be careful with what we see. I was telling in our conversation yesterday, we were talking about how the average scholar now is a self-trained scholar, whereas most of our greats were formally trained. Not that you need a stamp of approval from a white university or an HBCU, but there is something to be said about someone who had to go through a process before they went before the people with their version of the truth. Now anybody with a laptop and a webcam is considered an expert in an area that they may have only read an article about. And I think it's very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. I had some issues with some so-called conscious revolutionary scholars about the homosexual movement. I remember one brother and I got into a debate because he said we should kill. We should kill all gay and lesbians in the black community. I said I would never support nothing like that. I said I do not agree with their behavior. I would never condone it, but they are my brothers and my sisters, and I know that most of them come to that lifestyle as a result of sexual molestation in their childhood. If we want to kill them, we must kill the parents who allowed it to happen, and we need to also find the perpetrators. I said what you're talking about is not going to eliminate homosexuality. Why? Because the average victim of sexual abuse doesn't even come forward until they're an adult. So the person who committed the crime, they committed it 10 to 12 times over. You killed them for becoming, but you didn't even know the person who's responsible for that becoming. So it was reactionary. That's the type of stuff we got at. Kill the gay people, kill these people. And the elder of that brother didn't even check him. He went along with it. So I'm no saint, and I'm no perfect person, and I'm no expert, but I got enough common sense enough and discernment of judgment to know that there's people out there who are watching me and listening to me, and as a result of that, I got to exercise a certain degree of responsibility and accountability. I mean, I go to lectures, and there's 8-year-old children in there who were not brought by their parents, but who brought their parents to come hear Dr. Umar. And there's somebody the same age as my daughter talking about, I'll look at you on YouTube and I'm reading your book. And I told my mommy and daddy to bring me here. Not only is that an honor for me, but it increases my responsibility. So when I give a speech, I got to recognize it ain't just 20-year-olds listening to me. I got 7-year-olds listening to me and listening to me attentively. And so as a result of that, you know, I think I hold myself to a higher level of accountability when it comes to the things that I say. And I think that's probably why. Probably one of the most requested ones out there. People say, why they always call on you to speak everywhere? But about the rest of us, I'm sincere. And a lot of y'all are about to die and not making a difference. Anyone else?
Dr. Umar, from that speech, I found it really peculiar his attack on Christianity. I mean, that was very deep for me to listen to. I mean, really went at white Christianity with vigor, you know. So can you expound on that?
Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey have a lot more in common than they have in difference, even though Garvey was a Pan-Africanist and Douglass was more of a progressive and gracious. But one thing that both of them did equally was attack the church in terms of its lack of accountability to black people. The white church and the black church. He was in front of an all-white audience, so he attacked white Christianity. But I can show you speeches where he attacked black Christianity for his lack of action, not beliefs, but purpose. And Garvey did the same thing. I think that Douglass, and his courage and his sincerity, is one of the few leaders we've had to really try to hold the black church accountable. He was virulent in his accountability for the black church. Most people today, they're afraid to hold the black church accountable because they don't want to be stigmatized or marginalized, because the black church is very powerful. But Douglass was an exception to that. He took a mighty risk in standing up to black pastors, because back then, you don't question the church. You don't question the church now, but you really didn't question the church in the 1800s. So for him to take an adversarial stand to the way that religion was being used was very courageous because it could have gotten marginalized, but it didn't. And I think that was a testament to the fact that I think his work, like Dr. King, I think they were sent to do what they did. You know, it wasn't just about them wanting to lead. Some leaders choose themselves, others are chosen by the universe. King and Douglas in particular, and Garvey and his others, but there's some of them who had a special something about them that I said they didn't make themselves into a leader. They were chosen to do their work. And I think Douglas was one who was chosen once. Anyone else on that? Well, family, let me say that it's been an honor coming back to Rochester. It's only been my second visit. It's been about 2 years, so try not to stay away so long next time. Maybe Brother Jerry and Reverend Hunt and I can set up something regular where I can come at least once a month. And you know I'm coming. You know, so the first Monday or last Sunday or however. But I would definitely like to do more here because this is, you know, this structure, this institution is here in honor of my ancestors. So I would like to do anything I can to keep, you know, to keep that honor alive and keep this memory, you know, alive and well. So any way I can help the Fredrick Douglass Resources to do that, I'll be more than willing, you know, to donate my time and energy for that purpose. For everyone else, make sure y'all stay in touch with me. Y'all can follow me on my website, drumarjohnson.com. Probably will have a new website going up soon. Twitter at Dr. Umar Johnson if you're on Twitter. If you're on Facebook, I use my Yoruba last name for Facebook, so it's Dr. Umar Ifatunde, I-F-A-T-U-N-D-E. And that's my public page. You don't have to request or anything. Just like it and follow. I'm actually on that page more than my personal page because I don't know who's on my personal page. So follow Ifatunde. Email drumarjohnson@yahoo.com. Phone number 215-989-9858. Parents, any issues affecting your children, email me, text me, call me, let me know what's going on. Read my book first though, because if you read my book from cover to cover, you'll probably pretty much get a hold on what you need to know to be able to protect your children. It's all in the book. So please, I'm proud of my book. It's my first one. So I hope you guys like it. My second book is going to be a book on relationships and dating for Black women called Rules of Engagement. So that should be out by the end of the summer. And I'm going to give a brother Patel in the back, and we're going to try to make this Nat Turner movie happen. And I would like to also do a trip from Rochester to Southampton County, Virginia, so you guys can visit the Nat Turner estate, especially those of y'all who were with us this morning to Fredrick Douglass and Harriet Tubman's resting site. You want to go to the Nat Turner estate. That's one of those places you need to visit before you leave this earth and join your ancestors. Make sure you build your ancestral altars, connect with your living dead. Okay? Make sure you get your incense, your candle. We normally use white for the ancestors, but I know we tired of white, so get a black. Every time you cook, you give your ancestors your first plate of food. Make sure you dispose of the food before it begins to soil. They don't eat the food, they live off the essence, the energy. Okay, make sure you have some sweet smelling stuff. They love sweets. Put memorabilia up there. Just give it a shot. If you've never made an ancestral altar in your house, do it. And just leave it up for a week. And then ask your ancestors to help you in some relevant, non-materialistic way. And give it 2 weeks. And it'll blow your mind. Watch. You'll say, I can't believe it happened. That's your ancestors. Those are the energies that God has given us to help us on our way. Those are our guardian angels that I think we need to tap into. Still read the Bible. My ancestors were devout Christians. So I'm going to have to put a Bible up there for my grandparents. Okay, so yes, sir.
Yes, sir. How you doing, brother?
Peace and love.
Welcome back to Rochester. This brother just gave me the mic, and I know what he's thinking. You talk so much, you don't have nothing to say now. I'm sorry, I just came in late, brother. I came in when you were talking about the absence of strong national black leadership or black leadership on the national level. Along with that, if you could talk about your thoughts in terms of what we know, when we look historically, is that when we we had the strongest Black leadership, there was always organization. They weren't acting in some isolated fashion and so forth, but in the context of organization. And we don't see that either. We don't see a strong national organization. And we know we need to build one. We know some of the clear rivers and we need to build one. How should we move? We need to be moving yesterday in terms of that. And what's the role of a brother like you in spearheading that? Any of the rest of us were serious.
I do have an organization called Team Pan-African, which is the nickname for the international movement for the independence and protection of African people. It is Pan-African, but we also deal with our domestic situations. We have a traveling think tank. Every other month we go to a different city and we engage the people who live there on issues of local importance, and then we talk about solutions. Our first one was in January, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Our second one was in March in Detroit. Our third one was in Norfolk, Virginia in May. And then our last one was last weekend in Chicago. And they all go very well because we give our people an opportunity to talk. So if you guys would like to bring the meeting of the minds here to the Fredrick Resource Center, I think that's something that we need to do. It's a town hall think tank meeting where we talk about relationships, violence, political organization, the role of the church, economic empowerment, and I facilitate the discussions. Real powerful. Then the sisters have a meeting all by yourself to talk about ladies' issues and sisterhood, and then the brothers have a meeting by themselves. And then Sunday we come back together and we do solutions all day. Organization, who gonna do what? What's the follow-up? I just had the follow-up for Detroit. First weekend in June. The Detroit follow-up was larger than the initial meeting because once everybody got wind that we solved our problems and not just talking about them, they came out in mass. So I'll be more than happy to bring that thing to Rochester. We could probably make it happen before the year is out. So if you're interested in that, just text me your information to my cell phone so I'll make sure you're a part of that teleconference that we'll have to organize that. Good point. Oh, you're right. One of the other problems is we have deified our scholars, and that hasn't helped. We have deified our scholars. We have made them larger than life, which has fed their egos so much that none of them feel that they need to be connected to a grassroots organization. I'm just going to be honest with you all. These people who you fly in and talk to, most of them are not connected to an organization. Pastor Ray Haynes, my good friend, is an exception. And there's a few other exceptions, but most of them consider themselves to be too important and too big to do the dirty work. They will come and tell you how to do it, but they're not going to participate because I am a doctor, I am a scholar, I am an intellectual. I do not get my hands dirty. One day I'll have to do a lecture on the bourgeoisie nature of the Afrocentric scholar, because we are totally oblivious to the fact that most of our scholars are members of the bourgeoisie. In fact, one scholar, I'm not going to call his name, he was just used by a school district to crush an Afrocentric charter school. They brought him in to argue against the Afrocentric charter school to take control away and give it to the white folk as a prelude to gentrifying that city. A lot of them do anything for money. So I'm just saying, be careful. I don't want to be mean to anyone, but I grew up liking a lot of people. And now that I speak with them and share stages with them, some of them I still have respect for, and some of them I lost respect for because I've seen that you have no interest in solving black problem. Your only interest is in being seen, being heard, and collecting money. And although you wear a dashiki and you have an African name, you talk black, you live white, and you think green.
least that we give each other love.